It's 11 o'clock. You're with the People's Channel, GB News, and in a moment, headliners. But first, let's bring you up to date with the latest news headlines. And the US president said today the United States is going to be announcing new sanctions against Russia this week. President Joe Biden was speaking to thousands who gathered in the centre of Warsaw in Poland, telling the crowds the Ukrainian people's love of their country will prevail in the war against Russia. It follows talks held this afternoon with the President of Poland, a day after his surprise visit to Ukraine. The two leaders addressed security issues and growing NATO's presence in Poland.
The West was not plotting to attack Russia, as Putin said today. And millions of Russian citizens who only want to live in peace with their neighbors are not the enemy. This war is never a necessity. It's a tragedy.
Well, Russia has issued a warning to the West by suspending its participation in its nuclear arms treaty with the United States. Vladimir Putin making the announcement during a major speech on the war in Ukraine, where he also accused the West of trying to acquire limitless power.
Russia does not abandon the treaty, but suspends its participation. Before resuming the discussion of this treaty, we must first understand what do such countries of NATO, like France and Great Britain, aspire to do, and how will we take their strategic arsenals into account.
Here, government departments have recommended that NHS workers, police officers and teachers get a 3.5% pay rise in new submissions put forward to the independent pay review body. That's well below the average pay demand of around 10%. And that comes as nurses announced a pause on next week's planned strike action, saying they've entered intensive talks now with the government on pay. The Royal College of Nursing talks with the Health Secretary Steve Barclay start in earnest tomorrow. Nurses were set to walk out on March the 1st for 48 hours in their long-running dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. And the Chancellor is under pressure to improve public sector pay rises for workers after official figures showed state finances are stronger than predicted. The Office for National Statistics revealed the government reported a monthly surplus of £5.4 billion in January. The surprising number is mainly because of self-assessment income tax. But Jeremy Hunt, who's due to set out his plans for tax and spending in the budget on March the 15th, played down the significance of a surplus. Consumer News and supermarkets are going to be rationing a growing list of fruits and vegetables. Asda is allowing customers a maximum of just 3 items from a list of 8, including tomatoes, broccoli and raspberries. Morrison's will follow suit from Wednesday. Bad weather across Europe and Africa is being blamed for the disruption in supply chains, with retailers warning it could last for weeks. Those are your latest news headlines. Now headliners.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Welcome to Headliners. Joining me tonight to take you through Tuesday's top stories, we have the scoliotic... No, we don't. Scoliotic backbones. That's from last night. You can't all be scoliotic backbones.
I put something about us being bald.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know how
Scoliotic backbones was you and Leo, wasn't it?
Yeah. This is all about...
What's a scoliotic? I don't know what scoliotic
well, it's a sort of disfigured spine, Roger, and I'm not willing to see you libelled in that manner, frankly, or slandered, whichever it is.
I'm glad that you my corner in that way.
Anyway, listen, we have a couple of comedians here, and they're willing to do their stint, even if those who are operating the teleprompter aren't. So let's have a look at tomorrow's front pages. We start with the Daily Mail, I believe, and your lust for land and power will fail. That is Biden in Dune mode they're addressing. Putin telegraphed public sector to be offered 3.5% raise. That is unlikely, I suspect, to be an adequate offer. The iPaper, resign if you want to, Sunak tells ministers as he calls Tory rebels bluff on Brexit deal. We have The Guardian with nurses pause strike action to enter intensive pay talks. And The Times has Putin signals the return of Cold War nuclear tests. Picture of David Hockney there in a pair of extraordinarily unattractive plastic sandals. What are they called? Crocs.
Crocs.
I've seen those for a while. And finally, the Daily Star. Now farmers warn of spud and lettuce crisis. The thin end of the veg. Ho, ho. Those were your front pages. Let's take a look at them in some more detail. So let us kick off with the Times, Josh, and that picture of David Hockney, but that's probably not the most alarming news on the
Well,
page.
I don't know. Nuclear war, Crocs.
Crocs.
I mean, they're
Crocs
the end,
on a grown man.
They're both the end of civilization, arguably. So
He looks like Toe-to-Toe Hall, doesn't he?
Maybe he's
Yeah.
just thinking, if I'm about to be fried anyway,
Be
I may as
comfortable.
well, I may as well
Exactly.
transgress the last few. He's done most of them.
But he's got all that beautiful effort. He's got a lovely little cane there. He's got a lovely suit and scarf and everything.
He has gone very synthetic, though. I actually went to an exhibition of his about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer, I don't know, Times Fly, Royal Academy, and it was all done on iPad. He'd created loads of images using
read
sort of
about
iPad
that, yes,
and stuff.
yes.
I was a bit disappointed, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's a nice way for kids to, create some art when you haven't got access to
When you're
materials.
4, yes.
Yeah.
But mind you, he's very, very old, isn't he? So
Maybe
he's
he
probably
finds it easier these
rediscovering the
days.
same.
Yeah.
Paintbrushes are heavy.
Yes. Anyway, let's get on with the new Cold War.
Yeah, let's
Warming up.
do the nuclear war stuff. So Putin signals the return of Cold War nuclear tests. He's basically... This is a slightly strange thing. So there's a thing called START, the Nuclear Arms Treaty.
Yes.
He's saying he's going to suspend Russia's participation in it.
Yes.
But he's not going to withdraw from it. So it's hard to understand. Essentially what he's saying-
Moratorium.
Yeah, exactly. But really already they're meant to be examining each other's nuclear stockpiles and whatnot. That hasn't happened since 2020 because of COVID.
And that's what
Anyway,
START was it included
it was part
an
of it.
inspection?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, OK.
So they haven't done that. But the other thing is that he's basically saying if America does any nuclear testing, then Russia's going to do some nuclear testing.
Yeah, OK.
So it's sort of a threat, but also not. I think he just wants to bring up nuclear weapons, like, hey, guys, just a reminder, whilst you're giving all these weapons over, we have nuclear.
He also has, of course, got a bit of other rhetoric as well. But go ahead, Roger.
Well, this just seems to me like, as sabre rattling goes, it's fairly lame, isn't it? Because we all know what he's got. The moratoriums, the treaty's been in disuse for some years, as you've already said, and he's threatening to suspend rather than fully withdraw from it. So actually, maybe this is an indication of his relative weakness.
Yes, most of the rhetoric, I don't know if we might be coming onto it later, I think, mightn't we? But most of the rhetoric seemed to be more sort of a cultural and motivational sort of nature. And
Very much so.
Who's to blame and so on. Did you have anything to say about the digital IDs?
Yeah, give digital IDs to all for a tech revolution, urge Blair and Haig. This is former Prime Minister and former ex-leader of the opposition. Basically trying to remain relevant or trying to do stuff in their sort of retirement.
It was always Blair's thing, though, wasn't it? Digital ID.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more surprised to see William Hague.
I think it's to give like a cross-party element to it. But look, arguably they have a point or they're not there. But one of the things they're talking about, these digital IDs that's going to basically incorporate passports, driving licenses, tax records, qualifications, the right to work. It's an interesting debate because we sort of talked about this yesterday with how there's not this sort of cross-syncing of data that could be very helpful in a lot of ways. On the other side, you have more conspiratory-minded people who would argue this is the movement towards control by our governments and whatnot.
There's a very strong libertarian argument against what are essentially identity cards, but at the same time, of course, if you have any concern for illegal immigration, it's the inevitable tool that you have to use in order to restrict and monitor and control the labour market.
I think it might have been Bill Clinton was saying this, or it might have been Barack Obama or somebody, I can't remember, but the reality is it's kind of already there in many important regards anyway with the commercial organisations. They have so much. Your banks have so much data. Amazon have so much data.
And we voluntarily and delightedly carry our phones with us.
Yeah.
Every conversation we talk about, suddenly an advert suddenly appears.
Yes, exactly. Alexa's, you're interested in a little holiday in Greece, are you? Yes, pop on your next Google.
And it's a price we're evidently prepared to pay for the convenience and delight of the things we carry with us all the time.
Absolutely. But this report actually is wider in scope than that. There's 40 suggestions towards helping.
Yeah.
And we are behind in many countries. And a lot of this stuff in terms of like planning, permission for labs and things like that, how we raise money for science, these things
we are going to
slightly
have to
behind.
decide, do we want to be more like Singapore or do we want to be more like the Wild West? Because we're kind of getting the worst of both worlds at the moment, aren't we, to a large extent?
It's a debate that's going on, definitely.
Yeah.
And it is a decision we will have to make.
So come on then, Roger, you've got The Guardian, which is not your natural home, but
No,
do
it's
what
not
you
my
can.
natural home. The Guardian, which features a delightful picture of children throwing away the
Little
things that have made
tossers.
them so fat, which is actually taken. That's in a beautiful road in Wells, I know
Yeah.
that, and it's fabulous.
The Bishop of Bath and Wells.
Yes, of course, and it's a cherishable, fabulous.
The cathedral
city.
has one of those little mechanical clocks outside it, doesn't it?
It's the third oldest clock in existence that has been in use,
Wow.
and it's a phenomenal piece of engineering.
Yeah.
And it's not a mind-bogglingly beautiful building. Absolutely
Shame about all the pancakes on the roof.
So go on then.
The real story here is, of course, that the nurses, the RCN, have called off their industrial action for this week. It's very, very hard to tell, of course, from the outside who's buckled or what concessions have been made, whether it's the government upping the offer or whether it's the RCN capitulating. And, of course, we don't know and won't know until the details are revealed. But intensive pay talks are apparently now underway.
Well, that's optimistic. So they might get it resolved before I begin to move into the demographic that requires nurses on a regular basis.
But the government last year weren't talking to the unions at all. Like, they were calling them for meetings and stuff, and they were refusing to talk about money. Now, obviously, the financial situation is different. Inflation is now going down. They've got this little bit of extra cash as well. So that obviously now the government is at least willing to talk, and the nurse unions are going to take that in good faith for now. We'll see. Hopefully it will. The gamble by the government will pay off, but unfortunately it means that...
This is perhaps an effort to split the unions, of course, as well, because they're talking to the RCM but not the other unions. Which
well, let's move on to that, because the Daily Telegraph front page has a wider sort of story on public sector generally.
So, public sector to be offered 3.5% raise, even with inflation going down, that, of course, doesn't come close to it. No. And the private sector has had a pay rise, they're saying about 7.3% or something. So it's still below the private sector. Whether that's going to be enough, I doubt it. They're saying here, is it going to halt the wave of strikes? Probably not. No. I'm more concerned also by why the Princess of Wales is wearing a mask.
Absolutely.
It might be simply an anti-pancake mask. that pancake looks going to be wild there.
Stop it getting in her mouth.
Or perhaps she's using a body double and it's convenient.
Oh, that's true, yes, you can't tell. You have to look at the ears, I believe, don't you? No. She might be worried about little squirts of lemon. So the asylum backlog at highest level on record.
Yeah, 150,000 at the moment, which is a lot. And it's
a mind-boggling number.
It's a mind-boggling. Look, you can't blame the government for the numbers coming over and for some of what's happened, but you certainly can blame the underfunding of those departments and how it's got so bad.
But, there are more civil servants than there were a few years ago, and they're simply failing to process the applications at any kind of rate. They've become, somehow or other, and I don't know the detail, whether it's because they're all working from home or haven't returned to work in any meaningful way, but one way or another, they are failing to process applicants at any kind of satisfactory rate.
The suspicion is always that they've expanded the protocols, the process, so that it goes in ever greater and more self-replicating loops without making any progress. Parkinson's law. And smartwatches could disrupt pacemakers. It's kind of terrifying.
Roger's scared.
Yeah. I like this tiny story. This print is too small to read. Rodent may hold key to reverse menopause. Hopefully that will be a bigger story by the end of tomorrow. Daily Star. I love this specific rodent. Maybe that's a picture on the front of the baby. They don't know. That's praise be for nice beavers. But,
you think it's a pun?
They're trying to lure us into that, aren't they?
More beaver pictures inside, of course, is the subheadline.
But the thin end of the veg, now this is quite genuinely, they've made a silly pun about it, but it's a slightly alarming story. It sounds like fresh fruit and veg are disappearing from the shelves.
Yes, they are, temporarily, or for as long as the crisis lasts. This is to do with, apparently, flooding and bad weather in southern Spain and North Africa, particularly.
So it's not Brexit?
I don't think there's a link to Brexit as far as I'm aware.
We'll see if you can find one, Josh. We have to go to the break now, so that's our front pages. We will see you back very shortly. We have, in the second half, we have a break where the S&P breaks its own rules. We have ITV News and Sky News are in trouble with Ofcom. Nobody's perfect. And are you ready for the 4-day week? I certainly wouldn't mind. See you in a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. I am still joined by Josh Howie and Roger Monkhouse, both of whose spines are in excellent shape. So, Josh, the Daily Mail has details of Putin's latest speech. We go into the other details. I once again find myself unnervingly close to him on all culture war issues.
Well, this is it. Putin mocks Church of England's plan to use gender-neutral terms for God. So essentially, Putin lied, and he's did everything to sort of argue that he's not this evil warmonger despot, but he did have it right when it comes to the Church of England. Which
Cognitive dissonance.
Yes, it's strange. We're heading towards a spiritual catastrophe because of the Church of England's recent decision to explore gender-neutral terms. And he said, may God forgive them for not... So he's actually already respecting our terminology, the they, them. And also he's talking about the blessings of same-sex marriages and how. So, but if he moved to Scotland, he'd be fine.
Yes, that's
so
true.
He doesn't need to worry about
I wonder whether he. I mean, he likes to present his image of himself as a Christian leader of established church in Russia and so on, and there is a sort of close bond. And I assume the Russian Orthodox is still quite a powerful force in Russia. Do you think, what I'm getting at is, do you think that they think that we're still essentially a Christian country on which an ungendered God is being imposed?
I'm sure there's something in that. Of course, you assume, don't you, that other peoples are like yourselves always. And this is good red meat, isn't it? For the public, clearly, it works very well. You know, you can see how it might.
And America is
very well here.
America is dishing it up as well. You know, they have their transgender admiral and all the rest of it, and I'm sure he's quite capable of finding some juicy tidbits to chuck to the crowds from America's side as well.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting. I think the real essence of his continuing popularity in Russia, this is a very interesting point, his approval ratings, there's something up in the high 80s.
Are they really?
Absolutely. So
you trust them?
Apparently, this is the case. I mean, obviously, you will allow for bias, but nonetheless, apparently his approval ratings are incredibly high. And what's amazing, I think, is that even in an internet age and in a society as relatively developed as Russia, you can still control the media narrative by clamping down on all dissent and controlling the media.
But he did something even cleverer than that, because I read a book about what Moscow, and what he does is he allows this controlled dissent. So he actually encourages these little parties, invests money in them and allows them the freedom, and the same with the different TV stations and whatnot.
But you know, there are people who believe that term controlled opposition is used of a lot of people, including people on this very channel.
Well,
but you'll see it discussed.
Proven that
he does it, yes.
I just wanted to say also, this whole God, because when it came out a few weeks ago, I wasn't doing the show, was in Judaism there isn't this idea of gendered God, because there's no Jesus,
really?
so it's not like a
So
male...
it is possibly a Jewish plot then, this?
Well, everything. But the idea is that God is unknowable, so to attribute male, female to that...
Absolutely. It's a tradition which has emerged as much from Michelangelo and Giotto and that sort of thing as much as it has from the Bible itself, isn't it?
Judaism, we like to think of God as a bush.
Well, good as a bush. But there are passages in the Old Testament where God is... he is clearly personal, he's masculine, and he's a bit of a warmonger at times, isn't he? I mean, he's a sort of warlord.
You don't want to mess with him, her, they, them.
Wasn't Mary brought in to feminize the concept of a masculine god?
I believe so. That's from the Da Vinci Code. Don't try and cover that. Over to the Herald now, and I can't help thinking this is going to fall neatly into Vladimir Putin's next anti-West invective.
This is great. This is another wonderful example of how the progressive left can tie itself in knots and shoot itself in the foot like some sort of demented contortionist. Kate Forbes, who was, I believe this morning, the bookie's favourite to replace Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister in Scotland, is being referred to the SNP's own conduct committee by members of the party's LGBTQ+ wing after she said in an interview with ITV Border, and I'm quoting exactly here, and it's like a fairly uncontroversial thing, but apparently it inflamed the LGBTQ+ wing of her party. I'm quoting now. I believe that a trans woman is a biological male who identifies as a woman.
What?
That seems like a fairly straight-backed dictionary definition, doesn't it?
Holy moly.
But it's actually illegal, he says, one of them, according to their own internal, but also the new statute as well.
That's right, because according to the regulations that were adopted, I think in 2021, it is illegal or unacceptable to deliberately misgender someone or use phrases or language to suggest their gender identity is not valid. For example, referring to a trans woman as a biological man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there it is. And also she's in trouble for saying that if she had had the opportunity, she would not have voted for gay marriage, apparently.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I suppose is a little bit more straightforwardly reactionary rather than simply definitional. I mean, I don't know whether you would agree with it.
It's clearly problematic for the party, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although she isn't threatening to rescind any legislation.
To try and revisit that.
It's merely a personal stance, and she has been upfront about it. And she is, interestingly, part of this, which is quite a small sect, isn't it? The We 3 religious sect which I believe is based in the Western Isles, and they are
Yes.
quite puritanical. But then Scotland is a very conservative... and
Scotland always has been
country.
extraordinary.
Yeah, it's just the two things that come out from this. So number one is how the SNP, the only thing that really binds them together as an ideology is independence.
Yeah.
And actually,
Yes.
it's actually a very broad spectrum of the type of
Yes.
people. You think of them as this kind of woke party because of their actions and the laws they brought in over the last few years, but that's not necessarily the case. The second thing is this is from the Herald. This is from the only publication we were able to find that actually covered this story, and we, I believe, are the only national organisation who are now talking about it.
That's interesting.
And I think it's very interesting, the fact that she's now going up for breaking her own rules.
I don't know whether it's relevant, but I just browsed earlier the history of the sort of changing of the legislation and the public temperature, I suppose, about homosexuality and so on in this country. The Wolfson Report in 1957. It's another 10 years before you had the Sexual Offences Act 1967, which decriminalised homosexuality in England and Wales. And according to David Steele, who you may remember, David Steele from the Liberal Party, he was intrigued as to why it had been made England and Wales, not Scotland, and he asked the man who had brought the bill forward, and he said, because we're going to bring this bill forward on the Friday, and we know for a fact that if we include Scotland in that legislation, the Scottish MPs will stay behind and vote against it. But we can rely on them to go home on Friday knowing that this bill will not actually include them. And he said he thought, on the whole, that was a perfectly pragmatic and sensible approach. And now Scotland... well ahead of the pack, let's say.
Metropolitan Scotland. Of course,
in that
rural
regard.
Scotland, very probably not.
Absolutely. Josh, the Telegraph now, it sounds like Ofcom have noticed the disgraceful and exploitative behaviour of our two closest competitors.
Oh, terrible, terrible. Ofcom demands explanation for broadcasters over Nicola Bulley coverage. When the news came out that the body discovered was her, the family asked for privacy, and it seems like ITV and Sky News at that point were still hounding the family.
Is it Kay Burley in particular, I think, was implicated? I heard something on the previous show, Dan Wootton's show, yeah.
And that is not, arguably, not, that's not acceptable behaviour.
I mean, there seems to be... I'll be honest with you, I haven't followed this story as closely as some people have, and I know it's absolutely gripped some people, and there seems to be a general feeling, though, that the media have behaved atrociously throughout the last few days and have also pressurised the police into perhaps not behaving entirely well, and then there's been a bit of a blame going back and forth between the police and the media, leaving the family sort of caught in the middle. But a general feeling that the whole thing has been miserably badly handled from the beginning. I don't know, do you have a feeling on that, Roger?
I haven't particularly followed it, but the police obviously take every possible opportunity to cover themselves in glory, and they've evidently mishandled this horrendously.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I think their relationship with the media itself is broken down.
It's tattered, isn't it? I think that's right.
Responsible for the circus that surrounds.
But the feeling I got was that the media were excoriating the police, and in order to respond to that, the police unwisely came out and said, well, actually, we one of the reasons we think this is because we happen to know this about her historically. And then everyone was like, oh my God, we didn't need to know that. And that's a completely inappropriate thing to, you know what I mean? And it's all just become very much like two warring families on the same street.
Whereas in a bygone era, that information might have been discreetly released to the media, and they might have dealt with it perhaps more discreetly, more deftly.
Hopefully Ofcom will look at our covering of this story right now. And
I would like to think we are Ofcom's friend, and perhaps we can all learn lessons from this.
Anyway, courses. We're up to date on our homework.
Roger, Guardian now, latest in a series of articles supporting what stand-up comedians have been saying for some time, I think. Everyone's gone mad.
This is the world's gone mad. This is a report in The Guardian. And, of course, The Guardian's spin on this is that it is all about the defunding of mental health services in England and Wales. But apparently the police are inundated with calls to attend and deal with instances of mental health crises, which have spiked horrendously in the last few years, and particularly disproportionately in certain specific places. For instance, in Suffolk, police have recorded an increase of 342% since 2019, and in Norfolk, 260%, but then in Leicestershire, only 54%. So it's Suffolk and Norfolk. Perhaps they've just found out about the moon landings or something.
Yeah.
It's all kicked off there.
You're going to get in trouble for that one.
The police are clearly having to deal with these instances when they would be better used fighting, as is correctly pointed out by government spokesman, real crime. Looking for my bike would be nice.
But there is, I mean, there no doubt is a funding issue, but I think there also is a sort of general gathering of momentum in mental health crisis. People are thinking in those terms a lot more than they used to, aren't they?
But it's a wider trend. Derbyshire Police said the number of mental health calls has risen by 1,784% over the last 11 years.
That is...
and it does coincide with the underfunding of the government. And now they're saying that the government is saying that they're going to invest 2.3 billion additional funding. Too little, too late.
Well, we have a story after the break which will perhaps help to ease some of the pressure that people live under, but that is all for this section. After that break, we have South Park nailing it again, a race faker, and it's just not cricket. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. We have the Times now, Josh, and this, I have to say, sounds like unusually positive news for fans of a long weekend.
Indeed. 4-day working week boosts revenue and makes staff happier. We covered this about 6 months ago. They were starting the study then. They were bringing in thousands of people across a bunch of companies to see if this worked.
Yeah.
Turns out it does. Everybody's happier. Productivity has gone up 1-something% as well.
With a missing day?
Yeah, so essentially it's instead of doing 34 hours across the week, 7-hour days, they're doing 32 hours across the 4 days.
Right.
And also they
So it's 4 8-hour days.
Yeah.
Instead of 5 7-hour days.
And they're
roughly.
basically, people are like, because of that, they've cut out like long, boring meetings to justify their jobs.
Yeah.
They've found their own little shortcuts.
Yeah.
And it's really working.
And also, I mean, this must be, you'll register this must be a huge, very meaningful change for anyone who has children. because you have a day when the children are at school and you're at home.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't happen otherwise. It's like a miracle, you know.
30 minutes yourself, and then you get on with doing all the admin stuff that you need to do. It just takes up so much time.
Yeah.
And increasingly in a world where, of course, both parents work, it can make such a situation viable in a way.
Yeah.
We've all struggled to make work in the...
And I wonder whether presumably they have done it, as I understand it, with either a Monday off or a Friday off, but you could, of course, choose to take Wednesday off, presumably, or indeed you could probably have 2 half days. You could show up late on Monday and go home early on Friday
You
or
have
something.
to, but it's not that hard to work out a flexible roster. And when you're, manning phones or staffing a shop, obviously you have to work with that level.
Because obviously it's different kinds of jobs, there are different purposes, but there is a thing, I don't know if you know this idea of deep work. A guy called I can't remember, was it Cal Crystal? He wrote a book basically demonstrating the amount of interruptions that people get and so on nowadays. It's just extraordinary how hard it is to get your momentum going after even just noticing that an email has arrived, let alone actually answering it, this kind of thing. If you can create environments where people can spend 2 hours focusing on a single task, that's like the equivalent, really, of like a full working day, in a lot of situations.
And we are, of course, famously the least productive workforce in Europe now, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we've always had this macho work culture whereby we work longer hours than the rest of the world,
and then
America,
we just
but certainly Europe.
go out and get plastered.
And all of that is wonderfully macho culture, but in actual fact, it's not doing us any favours.
No, we all know as stand-up comedians, we've had Friday night gigs where the audience are drunk before they get started at 8 o'clock. And I think because it's been so exhausted, just released.
Yeah, no, it's the question is now is how quickly are other people going to start adopting it?
Be persuaded of it, yeah. I suppose for us, I do 2 nights a week here. That'll be me down to... well, maybe we'll just wait until everyone catches up. Josh, The Express has news that Meghan Markle is upset by her portrayal in South Park, which I have to say is unheard of. People are usually so flattered by these things, aren't they?
Meghan Markle is upset and annoyed over how she's portrayed in South Park parody. Like you say, it's like, I think that's a badge of honour.
Yeah.
Really. And actually they're saying, or experts as such are saying that the way that she deals with it is it could be good for her. Like, it makes you part of the conversation.
Yeah.
But if she sort of comes out and as they're talking here, getting their lawyers to look at it, that's like the worst possible response that you could do.
Somebody told me, I don't know, somebody was talking about this on Twitter, and I cannot say for sure whether this is true, but the Streisand effect, you know the Streisand effect? The Streisand effect, named after Barbara Streisand, obviously, is when you launch legal action to try and prevent something a libel being repeated, and instead you attract much more attention to it than otherwise. And I think it was originally applied to South Park. I think the South Park...
Oh, really?
They did something about her in a show, and she threatened to sue, and suddenly it was all over the front pages, whereas otherwise it would have been nothing. You know?
And this could be an indication of how genuinely dim and indeed thin-skinned they are.
Yeah.
How they answer.
Yeah, absolutely. How they don't have experts around them just saying, look, just go with it. Even do your own thing. Take the mickey out of it yourself.
It's so funny because, generally speaking, the thing about her and Diana before her was that she was supposed to be so much more media savvy than the old royal family, but in certain regards they have a better angle, don't they, generally speaking?
Just on a slight tangent, there's an amazing 60 Minutes thing you can probably watch on YouTube, which is like how they make South Park, because, they do it all in 1 week.
Wow.
From the writing to the recording and everything.
Really?
And it's just this amazing hour of how they get it done.
Yeah, I would like to see it. They have sustained quality and, verve. There's a vim to it. Over something like 30 seasons now. The Simpsons was exhausted after about half that, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Very well done. We went to see the Book of Mormon last week, which is also it's maybe a tiny bit dated, but it has been there for 12 years or something now. That's in Central London.
Still not rich enough to be able to afford tickets.
No, you used to go past it every time you go into the Comedy Store, bang opposite. Anyway, Roger, over to the Mail now. Further evidence that America is such a racist country. People will do anything to pretend they're not white.
This is lovely. Yes, this is like a Mrs. Doubtfire or a Tootsie story. This is the story of the Muslim activist who has claimed that she was of Latin, South Asian and Arab descent and has been working at the Philadelphia-based Quaker group of American Friends Service Committee. But she's been outed by her mother, hilariously, as being as white as the driven snow. Her mother is apparently of European descent.
I think we might have an image of her, have we? Let's see if they got one. There she is.
Oh, this is the lady.
She's wearing a lot of foundation there, isn't she?
Apparently she's been applying
Is she trying to look like Kamala Harris?
Makeup.
That's extraordinary. That's the way she's got it. Oh, my goodness.
She's got the scarf on.
She's got the flag. Extraordinary.
It's a hilarious inversion of the you know the prevalence of skin whitening cosmetics that are available throughout Asia and Africa.
Brazil, massive on those.
Used throughout the developing world, and this is a hilarious.
But there seems to be
happening in America.
There does seem to be some question marks over what her motivation was, because I believe she had actually been part of some media group previously that are known for drawing attention to Muslim crimes, Muslim terrorism threats and so on.
Well, there is a suggestion apparently that she's some sort of sleeper, some sort of
exactly.
agent.
Yeah, she's infiltrated. So watch this space, I guess. Josh, times now. This is one way to get onto the Iranian property ladder, I guess.
God. Salman Rushdie, fatwa suspect. Hadi Matar offered land by Iranian foundation. This is a Iranian charitable foundation. What a lovely charity. The Foundation to Implement Imam Khomeini's fatwa, which is the best named charity.
It's like the RSPC and you get bored halfway through.
Also,
I'm sure it's fine. It's a charity.
Where do you work? I work at the Foundation to Implement Imam Khomeini's fatwa. But it's temporary. I only work 4 days a week.
You just drop off bin liners full of bags, socks outside.
Wouldn't it be great to have shops?
I bet it does.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to steal there.
Oh, my goodness.
He's been offered 1,000 square metres, that's about a quarter of an acre, for a valuable and fertile agricultural land.
Quarter of an acre is not... That's a market garden, isn't it, really,
Well,
if that...
in return for the injuries he's accused of inflicting on the writer. And... wow, what a country.
I mean, he's in America, to be fair, the Iranian gentleman in question.
I don't think is he Iranian, though? I think his family are from Lebanon.
Lebanon, are they? OK, sorry, I apologise.
He's American.
He's American, that's right, of course. So he is awaiting trial, and the suggestion that he might be able to get home and start setting up like hoeing and cropping.
I mean, it's just
in any foreseeable future. But a nice sort of symbolic gesture anyway. They really are.
Feel like a charity story.
Yeah. Heartwarming. Cricket news now in the Telegraph. When it comes to trans players, they're stumped.
Ooh. You're out.
That's an image. kind of work with here, see what I mean?
This is how the ECB are somewhat prevaricating. This is shocking, really. But the Equality and Human Rights Commission have said that it's entirely within the remit of the ECB, the English Cricket Board.
Not the European Bank.
To rule against trans women playing cricket. There's been an incident specifically highlighted, I think, by the Telegraph, of a middle-aged trans woman being permitted to compete against 12-year-old females.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's undergone puberty as a male and has transitioned subsequently, consequently has all the strength advantages of an adult male, and she's caused injuries, apparently, because of her superior strength. Other sports have acted, of course, to exclude trans athletes, but the ECB are just a little bit too timid.
Well, this actually complaint came out 3 years ago, and they've been equivocating since that time, basically saying, well, we don't know, we're going to be breaking the law. And all of this is because Stonewall, in particular, has been telling these organisations the wrong interpretation of the law and conflating gender for sex. So this is exactly the result of that.
Yeah. So do you think Stonewall have done that cynically and deliberately?
That is literally been their policy to do that, yeah.
Is there any suspicion that cricket, unlike, say, boxing or like proper contact sports, rugby, there's I suppose a sense that it would be unlikely that upper body strength would hurt another player.
Well, two people have umpires and someone else has already been down hurt enough where they actually have given up the sport. It's 12-year-old girls. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, that is this section done. But join us for the last part in a couple of minutes, where we are looking at the dangers of models without makeup, meat labels, and the worst exam question ever. See you in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliners for our final section. Josh, we kick off with The Telegraph. They have news of the cunning plan our rivals have to regain some credibility.
Indeed. Look a bit more sweaty and dirty, BBC reporters told. So they're revamping the BBC News channel, and they said that this will hopefully inspire more trust from their viewers if they're looking dishevelled. So we're going to do a little experimentation here.
Oh, OK.
We're going to see how this...
You're gonna... My goodness.
What do you think?
It
you
doesn't
think people do like a...
doesn't do
You would definitely
for me.
host a children's science programme in the 70s. Looking like that.
Would be, I think you don't feel more trust.
The Van de Graaff generator.
Start talking about, COVID vaccines.
I have to say, always, I mean, the obvious snide remark is just, tell us the truth and don't allow your personal biases to creep in. That would be a good place to start. But I do remember when people like Kate Adie... If we can do the hair back, it's distracting me. When people like Kate Adie used to report from a war zone... What I always loved about the BBC was that they were well presented.
Absolutely.
They actually looked, and their gilet was zipped up, and their cuffs were...
I can't think of a good reason why they wouldn't be.
No, exactly.
I think it's grim that standards decline like that.
I mean, occasionally Jeremy Bowen is covered in mortar dust or something, and you're aware that he's been close to an explosion, but he never looked...
It's a decent piece of cloth that's been covered in dust.
You never get the feeling that he himself has allowed standards to slip. He's simply, he's been exploded at. I think she's totally over it. over. Having said that, you know, she's come straight from Denmark. Maybe she's brought some of the Danish kind of...
people smoking on air.
The great thing about stories about the BBC nowadays is that the salary is always quoted of the person who speaks.
She earns almost as much as a diversity and inclusion officer.
BBC News digital director, and she owns apparently 180,000, or something between 180 and 185,000.
She should have been able to afford a decent brainstorming session before she came up with that tripe. Roger, Mirror have news of a young Ukrainian model who sounds like she's taken that BBC advice a little bit to heart.
This is Tatiana Lin, a Ukrainian actress and model based in Taiwan. She says that she was in Malaysia with her boyfriend when the mix-up occurred, and she has apparently been blocked from a border, blocked from entering the country, because she didn't look like her passport photograph because she wasn't wearing makeup.
So we have the photographs here. Let's have a quick look so that we can assess. She doesn't look like that in her passport. Bizarre. What did she actually look like?
Well,
no, actually, that is the passport.
Oh
my God, get it off! But that can't be That can't be. Neither of those are our passport photo,
Clearly
are
not
they?
passport photographs, are they? That's puzzling.
If that is the photograph, the second one of her trying to enter the country, on a slightly serious point, I find that slightly alarming because what it reveals is how thin you have to be in order to look good in makeup as a model. Like, she looks kind of ill, doesn't she? And the reason is she's really...
But with makeup, of course, she would look fabulous, and the clothes would be full.
All the skin glow and everything would sort of...
All of that.
I think that's quite a serious thing here, but this is her trying to get into Malaysia.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they were being very racist and thinking that all white people look the same.
Possibly. She actually has got... I think she might have a famous Malaysian boyfriend. I think there's some pictures of her which looked like a photo shoot, and they were sitting next to a floating tray in a swimming pool that had a full English breakfast on it.
You've really invested in this story.
I was intrigued to see what differences she looked, but I feel sorry for her. And I want
went
to
down the rabbit hole, didn't you?
Josh, as we call it. Josh, the Mail now, once again, they're coming for our burgers from my cold, dead Baps.
Well, if you're alive still, we'll see. Scientists say gruesome cigarette-style warnings on meat. I don't know why meat is like capital letters like that. You know what? Yeah. Could be, it's not an acronym, could be used to shame buyers. So they've tried out a bunch, this is in the Netherlands, the Delft University of Technology. They've done a bunch of different experiments to kind of get to the gist of it, but it seems what works is not stuff about your personal health saying that this could impact your lifetime, how long you live or whatever, but more also the impact of...
there it is.
Oh, gosh, yeah. So here we go. Some horrible...
Some kind of weird chicken rape or something.
Animals suffer, and... This
is militant vegetarianism. It's not a health thing.
It's making me hungry, that, actually.
It seems like these scientists, in inverted commas, are all...
Or the impact on the environment. Those are the two things that seem to work. The impact on the environment and... photos like
But the idea that you might get constipation or high blood pressure from eating too much red meat, we can live with that. Well, I mean, I don't know. It comes from Delft, the home of Vermeer. It's a shame, isn't it, how far they've fallen. But I suppose this is young people, isn't it? We don't think the same as young people. I'm not going to change my view about meat. I regard it as my birthright. But I see my daughter's generation, they are quite they're a little bit squeamish about it.
That's because they've been propagandised for years and years.
Words of violence. And dead cows are really violent.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they are bracing themselves for a meatless future. I think it's about time we actually had access to some of these cricket-based burgers and sausages and so on, isn't it? They've been talking about those for a while.
I tried one of those.
The very idea.
Did you really?
Is it not ready?
It wasn't a burger. It was like a crouton.
Oh, right.
Like a courgette or so, you know what I'm saying. Like,
they made an artificial courgette?
It was like a chicken nugget.
Oh, I see. Well, a goujons type thing.
Chickens are incredibly efficient battery chickens. It's a very grim business, but I mean, you produce the meat in no time.
They come out 35 days till they're grown.
That's exactly.
Did you know that organic...
So they have a very short, unpleasant life. That's a good thing, right? If life is hell, it's a bit like the old Woody Allen joke, isn't it?
They're literally happier and consequently fatten up quicker if they are blinded in the cave.
That makes sense.
Now you're making me not want to eat meat anymore.
It's going to last for a good couple of minutes. A stern warning now from History and the Star, Roger, on the dangers of trying to get educated on the Never Never.
This is a chap or a bloke, according to the Star.
Bloke.
Quite nice. You know, they break down the stories and put them in our language to make them so much more accessible. This is a bloke in America who apparently is still paying down his student loan 45 years on, and he didn't even finish the course.
Sounds dubious, this, to me, but anyway.
It does a little bit. He's had a mixed and odd life by the look of things. He's apparently, I suspect, is he defaulted on a few occasions?
Yeah, he's tried to live outside the system. He's gone off radar. They've caught up with him. He's never paid off his loan. I don't know. I have minimum sympathy.
I am impressed by American turns of phrase, though, sometimes. He says, I live on peanuts. I can never get from underneath this debt.
Hey, we've got one more story. We're going to squeeze it in. This is Josh with the Star. Teacher fired for a straightforward inquiry into morals.
Yes, rogue university teacher fired after bizarre incest exam question caused outrage. This is basically he's talking about a brother and sister. They go on holiday. They make love, but they have contraceptive pills and whatnot. Is it wrong?
Is it wrong? I've heard this question because it's in Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind, and it's a discussion. And in that context, I think it was a very interesting conversation about how we instinctively feel that things are wrong, even though there's no
engineering undergraduate.
Yes, exactly. In Pakistan.
Yes.
I can't help thinking he was going beyond his remit somewhat. There's a time and a place for this sort of thing.
I think the thing where he says, please refer to your own personal experiences.
Yes, highly dubious. Well, the show is nearly over. Thank you so much for staying with us. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. Before we go, the Daily Mail kick off with your lust for land and power will fail. That is Biden to Putin. Telegraph, public sector to be offered 3.5% pay rise. The I-Paper have resign if you want to, Sunak tells ministers as he calls Tory rebels bluff on Brexit deal. The Guardian has nurses pause strike action to enter intensive pay talks, fingers crossed. The Times, Putin signals the return of Cold War nuclear tests. Those were your front pages. That is all we have time for this evening. Thank you for joining us for tonight's show. My thanks to Josh Howie and Roger Monkhouse, as ever. Headliners is back tomorrow. Andrew Doyle in the hot seat, Nick Dixon and Lewis Schaefer on the panel. And if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat, good morning. Stick around for the breakfast show next. I've been Simon Evans. Thank you. Good night.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, and then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.